So this video is basically the downfall and rebuild of my Monstera Adansonii. The whole reason I put this Monstera Adansonii on a moss pole in the first place was to encourage bigger, more mature leaves. I wanted those huge fenestrated Adansonii leaves, taller growth, and that lush climbing look you always see when the plants really start attaching and sizing up. But apparently, this plant wanted a level of moss pole commitment that I simply couldn't maintain. And once I stopped keeping the pole consistently moist, the yellow leaves, browning, and overall attitude started rolling in. So here's the situation. I actually have 3 updates on this moss pole that you guys haven't even seen yet. I started documenting the chronicles of this poor plant in December of 2025. And instead of pretending that this setup is still working, we're officially retiring this moss pole. Alright, so let me just go ahead and show you where the moss pole era started to fall apart.
Hello everybody. I just thought I'd pop on here really quick because I recently extended the pole on this Monstera Adansonii, and I brought you guys along to watch me add the pole extension, which I was very happy about. However, as you can see, this part is wet and this part is dry. So I put it down here on the floor so that I could re-wet the sphagnum moss in the moss pole, because I really want this thing to climb up and get bigger leaves. You can see here is the mother plant that I cut those leaves off of, and so they are sizing up a bit, and I'm sure that they would get even bigger if I were to keep this moss pole moist, because if I turn it around here, you can probably see that there's very good root growth in the moss pole. So it's basically not being watered, or those roots are not getting any water. So I'm gonna put this front and center so that I can be sure to stay on top of the watering. I could take them off, or take these vines off and start all over again, but I don't want to do that since the stems have already grown roots into the moss pole. I think that I will just keep updating you guys and make this the Monstera Adansonii Chronicles. Hello vine friends, we're back with the Monstera Adansonii that I had to re-moisten the pole for. It's been 2 days, and it took me 3 of those bottles in order to get this entire pole moistened again. So now that it's ready to go, I'm just gonna pull these yellow leaves off and chop the vines so that I can stimulate more growth down here. It doesn't need these yellow leaves anymore. They're not doing anything for the plant. So let's just get rid of them. So that's what it's looking like now. And I'm just gonna go ahead and chop the stems so that we can hopefully get more growth on this thing. If I chop this one right here, we will, let me see. If I chop this one, we will be able to stimulate more growth points, I feel like, because it has a lot of nodes and roots have formed in all of those nodes and grown into the moss. So instead of chopping all of them, I'm just going to chop this one. Fingers crossed we don't kill this thing. Okay. Now we wait. It's been about 2 weeks since I made the chop on the middle stem of my Monstera Adansonii, and I've been able to keep the moss pole pretty moist for the last couple of weeks. And as you can see, the chop has worked. New growth points have been activated on each piece that I cut. So here's a new growth, here's a new growth, and the one at the bottom has a couple of different growth points. The rest of them are still alive and vibrant, so I think we're good to go with that. And we have a new leaf.
Okay, so before anybody starts judging me, I want to show you what's been happening here. This moss pole has become my full-time enemy. I feel like every time I get it to a nice, stable point where the moss pole is consistently moist, I get relaxed and I feel like, oh, I've got time. And that time turns from 1 day to a month to 3 months. Or however long it's been since I've watered this thing. And it's really starting to affect the overall health of this plant. You can see here that we've got some browning leaves. We've got some yellowing leaves. And a lot of the areas have rooted into the moss pole. But if I'm not keeping the moss pole moist, then this is going to happen. So you can see how sparse it is, and I'm over this. I am so over this. So we're going to be removing it today and propagating it. And this is not going to be in semi-hydro anymore. I'm going to stick with the mother plant, which is in soil, even though she doesn't look like she's doing much better over here. She has more green on her at the top than this one does. So we're gonna go with this one. To be fair, there were some things that I liked about this setup. I do like that it's growing up vertically instead of like spreading out all over the place like my philodendron atabapoense. That thing has taken on a whole new personality and needs its own room. But as far as this is concerned, I like how compact and, just upright it was growing. So I think that keeping it on a cococoir pole instead of a moss pole will be the better route to take here. Because apparently this moss pole needed somebody who's more committed to keeping the moss pole moist than I apparently was. Like, this thing needed spa-like conditions, and I don't have time for that. This is actually 2 moss poles. So I'm just gonna cut the vines right here just to be able to dismantle the pole. And then I will go ahead and chop and prop what I want to keep and put it in water, and we'll go from there. And remove the moss pole, or yeah, from the top one. Oops. Now, this piece is holding the 2 pieces together because this piece has roots grown into the moss pole. So I'm just going to cut those roots off. There. Now it should be free. Ooh, look at the roots growing down. They were really trying. I just failed on my part. But this is the top portion of the cutting, and now I can pick up the bottom part and show you how that part looks. So this is what the bottom looks like. You can actually see that some of it actually, this part actually didn't make it. It rotted, and it's all brown and dried up because it was only getting sustenance from this moss pole that wasn't being wet. So there's a whole gap from the piece that I had cut that didn't make it. So, whoops. Okay, so I have my two pieces here, and I was gonna open up this moss pole and take the roots out and try and save the roots, but I don't have time for that. So I'm just going to remove the brown leaves off of the stems. I'm gonna chop the the roots that have grown inside this moss pole, and I'm just gonna put them in water. So that's gonna make my life so much simpler. And oh, that was easy. This vine doesn't really have a lot of leaves on it, so I think I'm just gonna chop it and call it a day. That's what we're working with. And I'm going to do the same thing for this. I'm not going to bother with trying to save these leaves down here because you see how they look. This one's a little bit longer, so I'm just going to chop it down a little bit and keep 2 nodes at the bottom to put in water. And then I need to remove these 2 bottom leaves so that this can have the ability to go into the water as well. So this is what's left of the top cutting. Now let me just take these off the bottom. I was going to try and save the roots that are in here, but I'm not going to do that. I'm just going to start over from cuttings. So 1. And this is what's left that is just going to go into the compost. Okay, I'm really excited now because this is my mother plant and these are the cuttings that we were able to save from that poor little moss pole. So once these ones at the bottom get some roots and I can add it back to this mother plant, it's going to be so much fuller. So I'm very excited about that. So honestly, this wasn't a plant fail, this was a plant reset. These plants really keep us humble, don't they? If you've ever experienced something like this where you've had to change plans in mid-project, please let me know in the comments below. And that's going to do it for today's video. Thank you so much for hanging out with me, and I'll see you next time.